Flashy girl from Flushing, the nanny named Fran.
Oh, Mr. Sheffield.
Miss Fine.
Welcome back to another episode of Oh, Mr. Sheffield, a podcast about The Nanny, a sitcom from the 90s starring Fran Drescher that I'm sure you're all very familiar with. I am Shawn DePasquale here with
Toria Sheffield.
Va-va-va-boom. This week, we are talking about episode 12, season 2, Take Back Your Mink, which I'm going to start us off right away with a little trivia there. You know, Take Back Your Mink is a song from what musical? Do you know this?
Guys and Dolls.
Hubba Hubba. It sure is.
It's Take Back Your Mink, Take Back Your Coat.
Yep.
I'm losing the rest of it.
One of my, I love that. It's one of my favorite musicals. I love Guys and Dolls a lot. It's funny because Guys and Dolls is one of those shows that gets performed a lot in like high schools and stuff. But that's
how I know it so well. Is my sister was in Guys and Dolls as an extra, and so we saw her like 3 nights in a row or something.
But they always do the song wrong because the song is really supposed to be a burlesque number. And they don't ever really do it as a burlesque number in schools. And so it doesn't make as much sense as when you see it performed in like the show or if you watch the movie with Vivian Blaine, the Frank Sinatra version.
Marlon Brando. Yeah, a very, very famous version and for many reasons, but one of which is Marlon Brando is not a singer and Frank Sinatra, one of the greatest singers of all time. So it makes for a great duo.
So yeah, it's a musical theater reference in a musical theater reference heavy episode, not surprisingly written by Fran Drescher and Peter Mark Jacobson. This was a great episode. So I guess briefly to recap, this is the one where Maggie is upset with Fran because she inherits a mink coat from a dead aunt, and
Fran inherits the mink coat.
Fran inherits a mink coat from a dead aunt. Maggie is now upset with Fran because Maggie is on a whole kick, which is sort of the B plot of this episode, where she wants to go to like a protest to save the environment, I believe. It's like a climate change kind of thing, which I have notes about that.
This is the first time we have any character trait attributed to Maggie that is not just, I want to find a cute boy.
Although she is going with a cute boy. That is the impetus for her going, is because a cute boy is going and they're going to spend the night in the park. They're like doing like a sleep-in basically for this protest.
Yes.
And Fran kind of wants to appease Maggie's to not keep this coat, but Sylvia is like furious about it because it's a mink coat. And this was like a very big deal, especially, I mean, mink was like a big deal, you know? It was like also a status symbol.
Yes. Well, and the other, big thing about this is Maggie's sort of youthful passion for a cause is reminding Fran of how she used to be like that. And she used to be, really like invested in the world around her. And she's, famously in real life and also has said on the show, she only wears faux fur. So when she inherits real fur, she's very conflicted about and she kind of wants to set a good example for Maggie too, I think, by not accepting the fur.
We should mention, this is one of the few times where I've found IMDb trivia to be helpful. Maggie never again and never before mentions anything about being an environmental or animal rights activist for the rest of the series. And then IMDb points out not only that, but she wears a lot of Agora cardigan sweaters, which is something vegans never do. So
it honestly would have made more sense if Gracie was the one who was on the environmental awareness kick.
In that opening scene, Maggie walks in and Fran is teasing her hair with this free hairspray that she got out of one of these magazines. And Maggie is like, Fran, what are you doing? What are you doing? And Fran has this great line where she's like, oh, honey, please, do you think I got this fullness naturally? Meaning she's like, there's a whole system under here.
Yes, yeah. So she incorrectly assumes that Maggie is shocked that she doesn't have naturally high hair. Really, Maggie is upset that she is using a product that is terrible for the environment, and that's how we set up that she wants to go to this overnight sit-in, and Mr. Sheffield is like, "Well, you can go, but you can't stay overnight," and that starts that B plot conflict. And then relatively soon after, don't we have the scene with Fran and Sylvia?
Yes. So we cut to Sylvia's house, and it's Fran and Yetta and Sylvia, and they're cousins.
Who we've met previously.
I think we've seen before. Yeah. It's
yes.
It's cousin Marcia and Uncle Jack are there. And although before we move to that scene, did Maggie hit a growth spurt in this episode? She looked different, taller to me. She just looked, I was like, oh, this is one of those moments where, like, when you're filming with children, where all of a sudden you're like, oh, that child looks completely different than they did 3 episodes ago.
Yes. And that happens a lot this season, I think, with Brighton as well. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, because adolescence is tough, man. It's not on like a schedule. It's not like, oh, well, they'll only grow up in between seasons. Like when you hit, you hit. And then all of a sudden it can sometimes be like a, within a week or two thing where suddenly you're like, oh, that child looks very different now.
Yeah. She went from like younger girl to like, this actress now could have been cast as the like hot teen girl, to like put it as bluntly as possible.
Yeah. She also looks like Cece's daughter in this episode a lot of times. Like a lot of times. And I was like, man, that's like unfortunate casting.
Yeah. And they reference that in a lot of like sort of online trivia. They actually call attention to the fact that it's very notable how much Maggie looks like Cece specifically.
Mm-hmm. But as we've already established, they have never been intimate, Cece and Maxwell. So there's no chance that happened. It's just unfortunate casting. Anyway, we cut to Sylvie's house.
Fantastic scene. This is like one of my favorite scenes in the whole episode.
A great scene in Sylvie's house, which I'm sure felt as familiar to you as it did to me, which is the very common Jewish family trope of fighting over the will of a dead relative. Yes.
So, and the other thing that was great about this, so as we established, it's Fran's mom, an uncle, and a cousin. Mm-hmm. And they are going through the will, and they keep referring to people from like the other side of the family and really wanting to make sure that like they get what's owed to them. And that like weird factionalism of like really othering other people really hit home. My family is so insular like that.
Same.
Like you're either in or you're out, to the point of like even inviting like a friend to dinner. If it was like going to be a family dinner, like somebody would take issue and like, be like, well, I thought it was just supposed to be us. And so, when there's other families where they're like, the more the merrier, like our house is a revolving door of friends. I'm like, don't get it. Does not speak to my experience with family.
Yeah, same. My family also, the Jewish side of my family, not my dad's family so much, the Italian side, but the Jewish side of the family, absolutely. Every time someone has died, there has been some faction, like division in the family where it's like all of a sudden it's like us versus them. It's like, we never see those cousins, so they're not entitled to anything. And it's certainly completely unbelievable that they might have had like separate relationships and lives with the people that we know. So therefore they're bad.
It's always something weird too, where it's like, well, and like Tommy, when so-and-so's husband died, like he didn't even, go to the funeral because he had a blah, blah, blah for something from like 40 years ago that like proves a point of why like that entire batch of family are like rotten eggs. But so anyway, so they're going through the list, and the one thing that they're very fixated on is who got their great aunt's mink coat, her like prized possession. And it's revealed that it goes to Fran. And literally, Fran and Sylvia jump up like they've just won the lottery.
Well, I think actually Sylvia does, but Fran is like, I don't know if I want the mink coat. Because we immediately get
isn't her initial reaction like, super, super psyched, and then she kind of comes down to earth.
Yes. Yeah. It's like a, oh, we won. And then it's like, oh, wait, the reality of me wearing this mink coat, and also the conversation I just got into with Maggie this morning about, activism and climate change and ecology. And I think it all sort of hits her at once. Yeah. And so she's like, no, I don't want it. They start fighting about it. We get a very funny line where Sylvia's like, let's not fight in front of the whole family. Let's go in the other room. And then they walk 2 feet away into the kitchen and they scream at each other so loud.
Yes. And this also rings so true because to Sylvia, it is this huge slap in the face to the woman who has died to not accept her coat. And this is a family heirloom. And at one point, doesn't she have this line where she's like, she came to this country with absolutely nothing. Mm-hmm. And, she worked and like this coat is a representation of like that American dream. Mm-hmm. And then Fran points out that, how did she end up getting the coat? It was like completely unrelated to that.
It was completely unrelated. It was through marriage, I think.
Oh no! She win it. She won it on like
right. She won it on The Price is Right. That's right. She's like, Mom, she won it on The Price is Right. Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah.
But so Sylvia feels like it is an act of disrespect to the family not to accept something, or not to accept somebody's final like wishes, basically. Yeah. But Fran puts her foot down and says, I'm not taking it. And this is what starts a rift between Fran and Sylvia where they are not talking to each other.
And well, yes, Fran, Sylvia's mad. She's like, at one point she says, what if I died tonight? Like, it would be your fault if I died. You would never forgive yourself for hurting me this way. Which is also rang very true to me.
Oh my God. You have no idea. I call it the nuclear option. And it's, I now as an adult recognize it as so emotionally manipulative to like, if one person like minorly disappoints you and then you go instantly to like, well, I thought you loved me, but you must not.
Yeah. Or even the guilt game of like, well, if you lost me tonight, you just want to think about what you just said to me, because if those are your last words to me, you would feel very bad. And it's like, why would you even bring that up? Yeah. What? Uh-huh. Yeah. We all have Jewish parents. It's tough.
Yep.
So basically Fran is like, I really don't want this coat. She goes, we cut to now a scene around the breakfast table, one of Toria's favorites. Yeah. Cece comes in a little bit early to the house and she's like, oh, is there extra room for me at the table? And we get some great Niles jokes about her being a dog. Basically, he makes jokes about like not allowing animals at the table. I think he does one about like, serving her dog food.
Yes. But this scene was very notable to me for a little bit of character evolution, because he gets in all of his digs at her and she takes a seat. And then all of a sudden we see him, and like as he's serving her, he stiffens very abruptly and like almost like yelps in pain.
Yeah.
And then she very smugly lifts her hand up into view because it's been like below the table, and she's holding a pair of metal tongs. Yeah. So she clearly grabbed his testicles with these tongs and squeezed. And she kind of does it very casually and just like moves on to her next thought. Yeah.
It reminded me of a couple episodes prior where she jabs him in the ass with her brooch, with the pin on her brooch. So we're starting to see now more examples of Cece, like she's done taking it and not giving it back. Like,
yes, and it works. It's working very well. It's working very well.
It works. And I think one of the reasons it works is because Niles never gets mad. He like takes it and accepts it. Like, okay, fair. Like I just ragged on you for 15 minutes and you grabbed my testicles with metal tongs. Fair.
Yes. It's almost like slightly like surprised, but impressed.
But then we get a great line where Cece's like so happy to be at the table, and she's like, I just love being part of this family. And she looks across the table at Gracie and she goes, how's your morning going, Stacy?
And then Brighton's like, it's Gracie. And she goes, oh, I know. I was just kidding. And then she's like pauses and she clearly has a word on the tip of her tongue. And Brighton's like, Brighton. And she's like, yeah, it's Brighton. So she's clearly, awful and self-absorbed as always. And we just further established that Fran is like really upset about this coat situation. And then I believe that it's either this scene or the next scene where basically Mr. Sheffield really senses that, Fran is very unhappy. So he decides to invite Sylvia over for dinner in order to try to smooth things over. Okay, and so then that leads into this incredible scene where it's before dinner, like maybe an hour before dinner, and Niles points out to Mr. Sheffield that if Maggie is not talking to him, to Mr. Sheffield, because she's mad about not being able to go out to this, overnight activism thing, and Fran is not talking to Sylvia, then the onus of conversation with Sylvia is going to fall on him, Mr. Sheffield. And he's instantly like, oh my God, I need to like bring somebody else in on this. Like, I can't do that. At which point Cece walks in. And he's like, Cece, do you have any plans? And she's like, oh yes, like I need to go pick up my grandfather from the airport. He's in a wheelchair. It's a whole thing. and then he goes, and then she's like, wait, why? Do you need me for something? And he's like, well, I was going to see if you wanted to, join us for dinner. And she's like, oh, absolutely. And he goes, but wait, what about your grandfather in the wheelchair? And she goes, oh, it's fine. He can just throw a 20 in his mouth and wave it around. He'll get a ride.
Wave his head around.
It was so dark. It was so dark. She like, the second she gets the opportunity to have a family dinner with them,
she's in. Yeah, she's willing to forsake everything.
And then they butter her up even more by saying, well, and Fran's mother's going to be here. And at first she's like not excited, but they're like, she constantly says how beautiful you are, and how you're one of her favorite people. And Cece is so sad and desperate for human connection that like she instantly does a 180 and is like, she's basically like, oh, I always did love Sylvia. I really can't wait. Make sure I'm seated next to her, okay? And like, it's just so sad and so manipulative. And then Fran's mother arrives, and she and Fran are being very, very cold to each other. And it's revealed that Fran, as a child, used to win her mother back by singing a song from Fiddler on the Roof. Yep. Which song was it? It was
Sunrise Sunset.
Oh yes.
So basically Sylvia walks in and there's like some tension and she's getting ready to walk out, and Mr. Sheffield throws like a napkin on Fran's head and she wraps her head and she's like, no, don't make me. And he's like, do it. And she starts singing Sunrise Sunset from Fiddler on the Roof.
Yes, and it instantly wins her mother back over because the lines are like, it's like basically a song about growing up and, remembering her as the little girl she once was.
Yes. Yes. It is a mother. It is like a song between like a mother and a daughter. And it's literally like, is this the little girl I carried? Mm-hmm. Is this the little boy at play? And then like Sylvia can't resist if she's like, I don't remember growing older. When did they?
Sunrise, sunset.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's just, and then it's so sad because a minute before, she had been, paying some attention to Cece because she'd been like willfully ignoring Fran. But no sooner does that happen, do Fran and Sylvia make up. They embrace. And Cece also tries to embrace both of them desperately. And then Sylvia goes, it's over. Which was just so mean too. Like you're just like, oh, but the thing is, the actress who plays Cece just threw herself into this desperation so much. It made me laugh so loud. And she's quickly becoming one of my favorite characters, I've realized.
Yeah, she's great. She's great. I mean, it helps a lot that the actress is like so good. She's incredible comedic timing. She really, really does, because this could easily not be as funny of a role as it is. And she is just always on point with her timing. It's always funny. It's always, she always has the right reaction at the right time, not too soon, not too late. She's really great.
Yeah.
Really
and
great.
She's so game to make a fool of herself, which which is actually a lot rarer. I think comedy, it looks so easy and it looks so fun, but it's actually like very much a craft. And she just, is so game to look completely pathetic, which is wonderful. And then, so that resolves that plot line. And then I think at this point, Maggie approaches Mr. Sheffield and she's like, Dad, like, I've decided that, if you decide not to let me go to this overnight sit-in, I'm going to respect your decision. And he's like, Maggie, thank you. Like, I'm not going to let you go. And then she just screams, like, I can't believe you, and runs up the stairs. And that's just the funny little button of that.
So let's actually switch into segments. And now segments.
So segments.
Yeah, no, I think we should move on to segments.
We can move on to our segments.
And now segments.
Segments with Shawn and Toria.
So first, let's do favorite moments, favorite lines. Is there anything before we get to this end stuff that we haven't already kind of brought up for you, lines wise?
Let me think. Let me go through my Rolodex because I did watch this way too long ago at this point. We didn't mention this scene when we were recapping the episode, but I absolutely love when Fran actually tries on this fur coat, because one thing that we skipped over is an effort to sort of manipulate her and make her actually accept the coat. Sylvia has it sent over to the house. And Fran is like, I couldn't. And then she puts it on and she's like, it's so soft and lush. Can you believe it? Like
she's like Niles, the satin lining.
Yeah. And just the shift at which she tried, that in her mind of how she actually thinks she could accept the coat was very, very funny to me.
That scene also pays off with another funny line. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
And then basically everything CC. There was this one moment where I literally laughed out loud, where after they resolve everything, during dinner, and Sylvia and Fran make up and CC tries to hug them, Niles walks in and goes, Miss Babcock, the airport called. Apparently there's a man in a wheelchair going around the luggage claim belt. And she just goes, ooh. Like her reaction was she jolts awake and then just runs off.
Yeah.
I loved that part.
Well, and the resolution of her ultimately buying the coat. I also
yes, we completely it's completely forgot
because
that.
Ultimately the resolution with the coat is that Fran agrees to keep it to satiate her mother's desire to have won this family heirloom, only for Cece to walk in and go, oh my God, I love that coat. I'll give you $10,000 for it right now. And Fran's like, well, and Sylvia's like, done, we'll take it.
Yeah. And she goes, it looks better on a blonde anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I guess just goes to show you that, cold hard cash is worth more ultimately to working class people than any type of heirloom. Yeah.
And I have to say, that was a gorgeous coat. I would love a coat like that. I really would. And it was already, as Fran even said near the end, like it had already been killed decades and decades ago. It's not like she was, it was just going to go to waste. But so, yes, that was an excellent moment.
Sure.
Too.
The animal died in vain, ultimately.
Yes,
if it was just going to get thrown away. Yeah. Another favorite line was when they're fighting over whether or not Fran should take the coat. She says, I'm not putting an animal part anywhere near me. And then she points to a platter on the table and she goes, could you pass the tongue? Which there's also a similar line in there about them not eating bacon. And Fran being like, well, we're reformed. And then there's another reformed line in there where Sylvia's trying to convince Fran to get the thing, to get the coat. And she's like, well, Mom, why don't you just take the coat? And she goes, because my breasts are too big. And Fran goes, well, that didn't stop you from wearing a tube top to Temple. And there's a long pause because Sylvia doesn't really have a defense to it. And then Sylvia just goes, it's reformed.
Yes. Which the thing is, I realize if there's a lot of people who might just not know what that even means. And basically there's generally, this is very huge generalization, like 3 types of temples you can go to if you're a Jewish person in the United States. You can go to Reformed, which is sort of like Jewish light. It's like, they often will do their services in English instead of Hebrew. Women can be cantors, which is not technically like allowed in the Jewish religion. It's very, embraces a lot of sort of like modern elements.
It's the best
then
part. It's the best. It's the best. It's great.
Well,
I love it. As a Reformed Jew, I love it.
Then there's conservative, which is kind of an in-between. And then there is Orthodox, which is, the very fundamentalist is maybe too strong a word, but a lot of Orthodox Jews will, they'll wear, the women will wear long sleeves and not show their ankles. Many of the women will wear wigs, to not show their hair in public.
Many of the women are relegated to just being homemakers because that is their purpose. Supposedly that is their job.
There's a lot of Orthodox Jewish communities in Brooklyn. And this is, honestly, that's different from the Hasidic community, which is, it's a thing in and of itself and actually more extreme. I won't get into 100%, politics.
It's more extreme. We don't have to get into politics, but it is definitely more extreme than
I'm not even like putting the Hasidic community into this breakdown of the Reform, Conservative, Orthodox. But they made me go, I've told you this, to a conservative temple, Hebrew school as a kid, 3 days a week, 2.5 hours each. Wanted to blow my brains out, John.
I actually think the bacon pork line is actually in the next episode. Now that I think about it,
there is one in the next episode.
Yeah, this one was about the tongue, and it was about the tube top and the temple being reformed. And the next episode has a great pork line.
It does. I knew you would flag that line.
Yeah,
I knew it.
Another favorite line of mine that I kind of want to discuss is they're sitting around the breakfast table and Fran says, to Mr. Sheffield, my mother always likes you because you remind her of Dave from the Chipmunks. And he's like, what? And she's like, yeah. And then he's like, I forget the connecting line now, but he brings up George Jetson and she goes, no, he's too goyish. And I got to ask, is George Jetson more goyish than Dave from the Chipmunks? Isn't Dave and the Chipmunks, aren't they the ones that sing that famous Christmas song?
I gotta look up a picture because I think Dave, the Chipmunks, I think his coloring might be a little Jewier than well, like for example,
okay.
I mean, that wasn't. I was just being. You know what? Now that I'm looking at the cartoon version of Dave, he looks
super goy,
very, very like kind of waspy. But I will say that Jason Lee, I think, could play
Jewish.
Sure. Jewish.
Yeah, if you're going off the Chipmunks movie, which didn't exist at the time, they were clearly only talking about the cartoon. So
yeah, no. Even if I went Dave the Chipmunks images, like he looks like he belongs at a country club.
He should be wearing a Christmas sweater in every picture you see him in.
Yeah, but now I'm gonna have to also Google George Jetson just to really hold on.
Well, did you have any other like favorite lines in this episode?
I think we covered it. Yeah, George Jetson, definitely not Jewish. Also,
no, neither one of them is more or less Jewish than the other. They're both.
Fred Flintstone, Jewish looking.
Agreed.
Okay.
Agreed.
Okay.
I think Fred Flintstone could be Jewish, and he married a Goyish woman. He married a shiksa.
That's true, though. A lot of Jews are redheads, so.
Also true. All right. Well, so let's get into, since I brought up shiksa, which is not the Yiddish word of the week, let's get into the Yiddish word of the week, which is schwitzing.
Schwitzing.
Now, I don't remember schwitzing ever being brought up on this show before. Maybe it has, because it's a pretty common Yiddish word, right? Mm-hmm. And schwitzing really just means like sweat. It means sweating. You have a schwitz, which is like go sit and have a sweat, or, oh my God, you're schwitzing, which is like you're sweating like really bad. And that's the context it's used in here. I don't know if that's something that was unclear in the way it's used in context. But basically it's Sylvia says, oh, look at you, you're schwitzing. You're so nervous, which is just like you're sweating yourself a lot.
Yep.
A favorite word of mine, favorite Yiddish word. I use schwitzing a lot. Yeah. I use it a lot. And then we can get into trivia. So the trivia really kind of focuses in on the references made in that final scene. So they're talking about two different things. They're talking about the Dick Van Dyke Show, which
and I'll just say this is when they're all huddled around the TV.
So at the end, they're all huddled around the TV and they're watching the Dick Van Dyke Show. They mention it. They say, we're watching the Dick Van Dyke Show. And they remark, oh, how come Millie, which is a character on the Dick Van Dyke Show, never got her own? Fran's like, how come Millie never got her own spinoff show? And then Yetta replies, I heard the actress was really difficult to work with. The joke is that Yetta is
that character.
Millie Helper from the Dick Van Dyke Show.
Yes,
Anne Gilbert. Morgan Gilbert played Millie on the Dick Van Dyke Show, and then years later played Yetta. And so that's a fun little, fourth wall sort of breaking meta thing. And then earlier in the episode, Mr. Sheffield asked Fran why she's always watching Days of Our Lives. And she's like, you're right. It hasn't been the same since Shane left. And he makes, Mr. Sheffield makes some line about, oh yeah, I heard he was terrible and he was terrible at a British accent.
Mm-hmm.
Shane was played by Charles Shaughnessy, who plays Mr. Sheffield on The Nanny. So it's another inside joke about an actor who has now gone on to be in this show, being bad at their previous job.
Yes. But the funny thing is also, and we talked about this previously, a lot of people gave Charles Shaughnessy flack for having, quote, a terrible fake British accent. He really is British. So
that's just his accent, folks.
Yeah, that's just what he sounds like.
That's just how he talks.
Yeah. And I think the actual line was like, oh, like a terrible fake accent, and like he walks off. So yes, it was a very insidery, winky, meta end scene. Very delightful.
Very delightful. And yeah, I mean that's basically it. The Fran or the Cece. Well, you really liked that coat, so
yes. I'm trying to think.
I think we know who the Cece is here.
I'm trying to think if I would. The sad thing is, I don't have any real ethical platforms to stand that I have. I'm like, what's important to me, and like, would I break that for something like this? And I'm like, I don't think I have any anything that I believe in so strongly. But I think am I what?
Are you not against fur and wearing fur?
Well, I was going to say, like, if I got it, if it was an antique shop. Oh, wait, 1 second. Hey, Google, stop. If there was fur at an antique shop, I would find like no harm in that. I think like don't let something go to waste. But if I was going to, I mean, I can't even imagine now like walking into like, a store that like a Nordstrom's and buying a fur. Like that
seems insane.
It seems insane. I mean, I'll say this, the faux fur market has some excellent pieces.
Yeah. I was going to say, I'm pretty sure the faux fur market has almost at this point eclipsed the fur market.
Yeah, but oh my God, I will say that, Shawn, have you ever felt like a real fur coat or like a real fur, like earmuffs or anything like that? It is to die
No,
for.
I come from poor people.
No. I mean, it's not like I ever had one either. But one time my mom went to Alaska and she came back with like, I think it was like snow fox ears or something. I don't know. All I know is there were these earmuffs and like you fully understand why it is like the most luxurious experience and why it's equated with just like luxury. They're like, while I would not actively buy it for myself now, like you can't deny that it feels like slipping into like a warm, cozy, like cloud.
Okay. If you say so.
I also realized, I think I would probably buy a pair of UGG boots nowadays if I was like living in a colder climate. So is that considered, I mean, is that for utility or is that, not?
I think it's not. No, if it's made of actual real fur, it's bad. So, I mean, if you bought faux fur boots for cold weather, that would be acceptable. But if you were wearing like real fur, I think that's considered unacceptable.
So I guess I guess I'm not that great a person because I would definitely buy UGG boots, for example.
But that's not real fur, is it?
Sure it is. They're made in Australia. They're Oh God, you know what oh God. Oh, so the truth is coming out. I have to really like look myself in the mirror one of these days. Didn't I tell you how when my mom visited a couple weeks ago, she pulled out this moisturizer and she was like, "Oh, Toria, you have to try this moisturizer. It is the best. it has brought my skin back to life. Like, please try it." I'm like, "Oh, okay, great." And she kept saying it had emu and oils. And I was like, oh, and I put it on my face and it felt amazing. And then I look at the ingredients and like ingredient number 1 is emu oil. And I'm thinking like, okay, like what plant, what botanical is emu oil? It is oil made from the fat of an emu.
Yeah, dude. What did you think it was?
I had no idea that was a thing that existed. I could not believe I just slathered it all over my face. And that she didn't warn me or give me the heads up. And apparently it is like a big thing in Australia, emu oil. It's a very common skincare ingredient. It's supposed to be soothing, anti-inflammatory. They farm emus for their fat for these things. And I ordered myself a bottle. So
and I was wrong. Ugg boots are in fact made of shearling, which is the skin with the fleece still attached. So,
but I want to look into, I'm going to say Uggs ethically made.
No, they're not. No.
How do you know?
Sheep are castrated and parts of their tails are cut off, often without painkillers before they're finally slaughtered for their skin. So, no.
Wait a second. I'm looking at the Ugg website right now.
What is the ethical way of stripping the flesh from an animal?
Well, you could have them live very nice lives and then not. I guess so. I got to look into the emu stuff though.
All right. Well, so you're the CC. I'm the Fran. And we've established that Toria might not be morally that great of a person.
Whatever. I've seen Shawn eat a bacon cheeseburger before.
It's true. I do love bacon. It's true. I'm not a vegetarian or a vegan. I just won't I'll eat it because I feel like that's nutrients, I guess. But like, I don't know if I want to just parade around wearing like animal skin. That makes me feel weird. Like so weird, you know? I don't wear the bacon as a hat, Toria.
Well, yeah, I mean, that would just be too tempting. You smell too delicious.
I would love it too much. All right. And that's it. That's the episode. Take back your mink.
Yep.
If you liked this episode, or if you didn't, let us know on social media at Oh Mr. Chef Pod. That's on Instagram and the Twitters. And if you really liked this episode, go leave us a 5-star review and a comment on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcast, because that helps other people find the show. If you hated this episode or this show, don't leave a mean review. That's just petty. There's got to be something else you can do, you know? Mm-hmm. So something, anything else you can do with that.
Just don't listen.
Just don't listen to it. Just shut it off. And never listen to us again. Unfollow us on all social media. We will not be offended if you do that. But we will be slightly offended if you go out of your way just to say something mean. That's just mean, guys.
But I guess you can express an honest
opinion. Hey, listen, everyone's free to do whatever they want. I'm just saying it hurts our feelings. So if you care about feelings, at least mine, because I care about the feelings of animals, maybe not Toria's so much because she's like a miniature Cruella de Vil with less money and better hair. Then I guess,
thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I'll take it as a compliment.
She got much better hair. I don't like that. I don't like that look on Cruella.
Yeah, all I heard was the compliment. The rest just went through me like a sieve.
Or a shiv, depending. All right, everybody. Bye for now.
Bye.
The Flushing Girl from Flushing, the nanny named Fran.
Oh, Mr. Sheffield.
I go, Miss Fine.